What's up guys, welcome back to Lex Alexis. Today we have got more table predictions to unfold. This time we're going to a different league entirely within the Premier League. This has also been a bit of a tradition for me to try and predict the exact Premier League table. And I've got to tell you, I think it was the hardest year that I've ever done with predictions. Last year was pretty bad with some of the calls that I made, especially regarding Chelsea and Spurs. But this year, I think is even harder, especially in the bottom half of the table this year. There's been a lot of teams I've been chopping and changing. But now I feel like I'm a little bit more content with my picks. I'm going to reveal them. And honestly, we've only got within a matter of days until the new season starts within the Premier League. So I really got to get these out as soon as possible. But guys, make sure you also predict the table in the comments down below. I would be very interested to see your thoughts as well, and it will be potentially a nice thing to look back on when we do our reaction to our predictions. If you guys like what you see, please smash the like button. It really helps the growth of this channel. Please also hit that subscribe button if you've not done so as well, because it really helps. It's free to do, and honestly we're getting there to 2,000 subscribers at the moment, so if you guys can really contribute to me getting there, that really would be appreciative. And please also share the channel too. All these things really do help. But without any further ado, let's start unraveling my Premier League 23-24 predictions. No one likes to predict the bottom three, but I have to do it. And 20th place for me is Sheffield United. And that is what the majority of the people that I have seen so far are predicting as well. They are walking into this season with a much lighter squad than what they had within the Championship, which is already quite concerning to me. They do seem to be letting a lot of their high profile players go. Ndiaye, for instance, has left very recently. Sander Berge is very linked with a couple of clubs. In fact, a couple of Premier League clubs being linked with Sander Berge in the moment. So, you know, Sheffield United have really got to do all they can to keep more of their players in. And with the investments, they've not really blown me away, to be honest. So overall, with them losing a lot of their squad and their investments not completely blow me away. Maybe Trusty could be decent, but other than that, I'm not really feeling too confident with Sheffield United this season, unfortunately. 19th place might come as a shock to you, but I've gone for Wolves. I think with Wolves this season, it's really going to be dependent on the loyalty of Lopetegui. I had a sense that he felt quite frustrated with Wolves, especially near the end of the season. As soon as they got their survival confirmed mathematically, Wolves actually went through a terrible run of form in the tail end of last season. And I do think their business has been a bit stagnated. Cunha from La Liga actually could be a decent signing. He was actually previously linked to Wolves in previous years, so I'm pleased that they managed to get him this time. But that's really been the only signing that has kind of caught my attention. They've lost some big players in that squad. The biggest loss, Ruben Nunes, going to the Saudi League, I think is a really big blow for that Wolves team. Jimenez, I know obviously he wasn't as prolific as he was since that head injury, but he was an important player, you know, for that Wolves team. So I think they've lost a big part of that squad that gave them stability within the Premier League. And the ingoings in, apart from Cunha, I don't really see anyone that could potentially step up to the play. And if Lopetegui does go, then I do think it's going to be very difficult for Wolves to find a like-for-like replacement to give them that stability, because before Lopetegui came in, Wolves were really struggling, just couldn't score goals, and they were starting to concede a couple more goals too, and they did concede quite a fair bit more last season. So I do think they're not really showing me signs of improvement, so that's why I've got Wolves, unfortunately, getting relegated, which would end their over 5-year stay within the Premier League. So the fact that they've stayed in the Premier League this long, it's definitely their longest stay in the Premier League in recent history. But it would be a shame for the Premier League to lose a team like Wolves, because Wolves really do offer quite a fair bit to this league. 18th place, I'm going with Luton Town. I would love to see Luton Town survive. But being realistic, I think what Luton Town are doing is actually quite clever. They are building essentially a super championship team, picking the best players from championship clubs in their season. I consider Chong being the best Birmingham player last year. Luton got him. I consider Ryan Giles being one of the best Middlesbrough players from last year. Luton have got him in. So I do think there's a couple of really good additions there. But I will be saying that they're good additions for the Championship. They've now got to climatise to the Premier League, where ultimately attacks are going to be more ruthless than they are within the Championship. And if Luton do miss many chances, they're going to be even more punished for it. I do think Luton will give it a good go. I don't think they're going to have a record low points total, as I'm hearing some other people predict. I do think they will offer something, but I just sadly think that they may run out of steam come the final couple of months of the season. But once again, I really do hope I'm wrong, because it'll be such a fairy tale story. It will remind me of when Huddersfield survived, actually, and so many people wrote off Huddersfield. I think I was actually strangely predicting Huddersfield to survive in their promoted season, and I would have loved to do the same for Luton, but unfortunately I can't quite see it being a little bit more realistic there. 17th place may come as a surprise, because some people are predicting good things for them, but I think Nottingham Forest are going to be in and around that region of the table again. It sounds like that their goalkeeper will be Matt Turner, because Dean Henderson has ultimately returned to Manchester United. How he's going to be as a number one goalkeeper, I'm not too sure. Their squad, essentially mostly the same. Johnson's being linked, but I think Johnson's going to stay on, hearing the reports and developments of those things. Morgan Gibbs-White and Johnson, I think, will be the two most important players in that Nottingham Forest squad. Their ingoings do interest me. They haven't splashed the boat out in getting new players in. You know, essentially their first season was really just transforming their squad and letting it climatise. And what we could easily see is this season, you know, they start playing with a little bit of chemistry and a bit of effectiveness. But Nottingham Forest have got a really tough start to the season, and I do think momentum is a really big thing for the Premier League, especially considering that there's a lot less games in the Premier League than there are in the Championship. So if Nottingham Forest have got a really tough start, they could essentially easily be on, you know, bottom three by the time we hit September, October. And at that time, that's when the pressures start to rein in, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the team regroup when eventually their running starts gets a little bit more forgiving. So I think it'll be a little bit tough at times, but I think overall they've got enough options in that squad to carry them over the line and for them to survive a second consecutive Premier League season. 16th place for me is Everton. I don't see them making too much progress under Sean Dyche. There are a couple of people who are thinking Everton could go down this year. For me, for that they've got Sean Dyche for a full season, you know, as long as things don't go wrong, I think Everton will survive. I'm not necessarily saying they'll survive comfortably. I do think that squad still is lacking investment. They've let players go like Cody and Yerry Mina, who played a big part in their back line. And Damari Gray going as well from Everton, big loss as well. So they have lost a lot of key players in, and I would have loved for them to actually invest a little bit more as well. So people are arguing that maybe their squad is worse off and that means they go down. But at the same time, you've got to think of other circumstances of teams going up and stuff. I do think Everton, with their options, I think they've got enough. And I think with the way that Sean Dyche will make his team drilled, I think he's got enough credibility to make this team survive. I don't think necessarily Everton are going to jump up the table, but I think they'll just make steady improvement rather than monumental improvement, as some other people may be thinking as well. So coming up next in the table is West Ham. I do think West Ham are going to fall around 15th place. Now, obviously last season, I think a lot of people got West Ham wrong. You know, they were coming back off getting Conference League the season before, and people thought that they could juggle that with the options they had. But when they did have Conference League, they really did struggle with their league form, and they, at one point, West Ham looked like that they could get relegated. They ultimately survived by grinding out a couple of really good results. I mean, getting that draw against Arsenal, for instance, getting those results out of nowhere actually turned out to be the difference in the end, and West Ham did have enough options there to survive. West Ham have got a big hole to fill, however, with Declan Rice leaving, and as of recording, I believe they're close to signing someone from Ajax, and they are linked with Manchester United double with Scott McTominay and Harry Maguire. ultimately, quite a few of the Man United fan base would probably want them to go to West Ham, but Manchester United are definitely not going to let them go until they match, their deals that they have for them as well. West Ham have not invested a lot for me, and the fact they've got Europa League football because of them winning the Conference League the previous year. I mean, I don't know if it means they're automatically qualified or they've got a qualification stage. Maybe I've not looked into that, but there is a chance that they will play Europa League because of them winning the Conference League. If that is the case, then I do think West Ham are going to struggle again, because likewise with the Conference League, it is European Thursday nights, and I do think their squad is a little bit lighter than what it was last year. So I do think it'll be similarly, a bit of a struggle for West Ham, and there are murmurs of tension going on. So ultimately, if you're going to get chaos, I do think you're going to be within the bottom 6 of the table. West Ham, I think, will be 15th. Some people predicting them to finish high because of the squad, and I get that. But I do think with that balance and that lack of depth, I can't predict them to finish any higher than 15th. But this prediction could definitely turn out to be my worst prediction by a long way. 14th place is Bournemouth. Now, I'm surprised I was going to predict Bournemouth this high. I think some people would have thought, okay, second season syndrome, Bournemouth are going to go down. But I'm really quite excited with the appointment of Areola coming in for Rayo Vallecano to manage Bournemouth. I actually quite liked what he did in La Liga, getting a Rayo Vallecano side nowhere near around the top 8, and managing to exceed everyone's expectations and taking Rayo Vallecano to that top half of La Liga. He can definitely get a best out of many players, and I do think that Bournemouth squad has got some really good options, and I do think the options that Areola has, I do think it could work well. I think Gary O'Neill, ultimately, when they did dismiss him, I thought was a bit of a lunacy to get rid of him. But seeing that they've got him now in charge, I think will be interesting. It could work, but also I'm also thinking it could work the flip side of that, and then Bournemouth could crumble down. And it actually wouldn't surprise me to see Bournemouth reappoint Gary O'Neill at one point in the season to try and recover things. So things could go really interesting with Bournemouth this year. I'm not anticipating too much improvement or anything. I do think it'll just be a little bit more of a stable season, and Bournemouth will just slowly but surely just try and stable their funds a little bit and be a stable Premier League club. And that's definitely one thing that they will like to be. 13th place, I'm going for Fulham. So I'm thinking Fulham will drop down a little bit. Not as low as some people are predicting, but I do think with Mitrovic potentially moving away, it can definitely be a big part of me not having as much confidence, because Mitrovic contributed to a large percentage of Fulham's goals and goal contributions last year. So Fulham would definitely need to act quickly if they will need to try and fill that gap. They've still got Mitrovic, but if he's playing unhappy with that squad, then it can definitely rub off negatively with some of the younger players there. You definitely want a full squad of players who are committed to play for Fulham. If you've got one that's not committed, then he's your best player. It could definitely cause tension there. So once again, I'm going to be very intrigued to see how Fulham develop within the rest of this season. I'm very pleased for them that Marcus Silva has shown his commitment. He's turned down a deal to join the Saudi League. So I'm really, really pleased that Marcus Silva has definitely shown his commitment there. But again, with that sort of tension there, I'm not anticipating Fulham to potentially exceed their expectations. I think it'll be a slight drop, and especially if Mitrovic goes, I think this place will be the max that they could finish, in my personal opinion. So for me, Fulham are going to go down a little bit in 13th place. 12th place in the table is newly promoted Burnley. I'm not predicting Burnley for top half. I think they'll be around that region of the table. And I got to say, I think from 15th to 11th place, it really could be any of those four teams in those orders. It's really me just guessing about which one I've got a little bit more confidence in than the rest, in my opinion. Burnley, I think, have definitely got the best style of football going into the Premier League as well. It definitely would need to make some tactical changes, because we saw at times, especially within the FA Cup when they were demolished by Manchester City, it can allow Burnley to be a little bit open. But I do think Vincent Kompany has learnt that the very hard way. And I do think with other teams around that lower part of the table, I think Burnley have got more to offer. And I think with an exciting young manager in Vincent Kompany, I definitely think with the hype and just the feel-good factor of Burnley being back, I think could carry them across and could actually finish them in a relatively good position. I think a bit similar to where Fulham finished from last season. So I'm going to go for Burnley 12th. Let me know what you think about in the comments down below. 11th place on the table is Crystal Palace. So this is like gone with this region of the table for the teams that I think could potentially be in a relegation battle. I think from every team I'm going to predict upwards, I anticipate will be safe this season. And Crystal Palace I anticipate to be the best of the rest, because at this moment in time I know they've not signed anyone, but they've, apart from Zaha, they've not really lost anyone that's going to really damage their team. Eze still there, Elise linked with Man City and Chelsea at the moment, but if they do keep both Eze and Elise, that will be a really, really big win for Crystal Palace. And the fact that Roy Hodgson is staying on to lead them, I just think Hodgson is a safe pair of hands for Palace, and I think he will be one of the biggest factors to make Crystal Palace get safe early on, because when he returned to Palace when they were struggling with their form, the turnaround Palace had, it was night and day for what we were seeing under Vieira when Hodgson came in. And I think with a full season, Hodgson will make things steady. He'll be a steady Eddie in a way. You know, won't get them to perform amazingly well within the table, but he'll do enough to make sure that there's more than enough distance between them and the bottom three, and I think they'll do exactly that. So for me, Crystal Palace could finish 11th, but I could easily see them dropping down if they lose either one of Eze or Elise, or even more of their crucial players, because with the transfer window not ending, you know, this table could look really, really bad after that. So I am putting my neck on the line putting these predictions within this time. Now I made it to the top 10. So these 10 teams are the 10 teams I'm confident won't go down. And watch me clip that right now and one of them go down this year. 10th place, I predict Brentford. I think Brentford will be there and thereabouts again, with a slight drop off because with no Ivan Toney. Ivan Toney contributed again, likewise to Mitrovic, a high percentage of his respective team's goals. But I do think Brentford have actually prepared for that. And when Toney wasn't present in the final couple of games of the season, Brentford did find a way to use the likes of Mbrumo to get more goal contributions in. Visser, another player who managed to get more goal contributions since Toney left as well. So I think Thomas Frank is just such a tactically equipped manager that he can find a way to make use of a bad situation. And Toney will return near the end of the season when he serves his 1-year ban for football. So I do think Brentford may have a couple of teething problems with a lack of a number 9 up there, but I think with the style of football that they play, I think Frank is going to find a way to cope with that. And I do think as long as their forward players stay fit, I think they'll be okay. And defensively, they are one of the better teams in the league, in my opinion. So I think having that would give them a really good, comfortable finish in 10th place. 9th place in the table, probably the shock, is Brighton. I am predicting Brighton to fall quite a fair bit. It's a 4th-place fall for Brighton. And ultimately, it's me not knowing how they're going to cope with European League football and, you know, Premier League football. And, of course, they've lost a couple of players along their way. They've lost goalkeeper. I know Sanchez was kind of their second choice in the end of the season, but ultimately he started most of Brighton's games in goal last season. McAllister, they've lost to Liverpool, which was a big player within their starting 11. There could be a chance they could lose more. Caicedo sounds like he will stay at Brighton, as disheartening that is to say as a Chelsea fan, but if he does go, then that is, you know, going to be very, very interesting to see. For one, can they replace someone in time within his place? And two, if not, how they're going to deal with that gap within that midfield, because he was absolutely crucial in Brighton's setup last season. So I think with me predicting them 9th place, which I think would still be a bloody great finish for Brighton, it's me just thinking that will their squad cope within Europa League football to Premier League football? And they've lost a couple of other players as well. Undav as well has gone to Bundesliga, I think, as well. So I do think with some of the ingoings they got, because they've got a couple of people in, interesting ingoings there, but again, they're going quite left field with their signings, you know, players that we don't necessarily, observe a lot, but they could turn out to be absolutely amazing players. I mean, João Pedro is going to be an interesting signing. I'm very interested to see how he gets on. But other than that, I think the squad's going to be very, very similar to what it was, with the minus exception of McAllister. And I do think with the squad depth being a little bit light and then coping with Europa League football, I think that's why they're going to go down in ninth place. But I think, again, it could be a team that I could really underestimate. I think a lot of people underestimate Brighton. I feel like Brighton almost like that as well. They like to prove people wrong. Coming down next to the table is Spurs, Tottenham Hotspur. So I do think Tottenham will be around 8th place, which will be exactly the same position as they finished last season, to be honest. There could even be a chance they could even finish lower if Harry Kane does move away to Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich at the moment feel like that they do not know how to negotiate with Daniel Levy. Daniel Levy is definitely getting the upper hand of Bayern Munich's representatives for them trying to entice Harry Kane to go to Germany. It looks like that, he was clapping the fans off after their last friendly game against Shakhtar Donetsk. But whether that means, clapping, saying goodbye, I'm going to Germany or whatever, I think it's very difficult to determine from that. And honestly, even if Kane does stay, I do think with their lack of ability at the back, I think it really will expose them. And with Postecoglou, with a new manager coming in, I think it will take time for Spurs to effectively play the way that he would want his team to play. I do think they'll be better later on in the season. I feel like they'll start quite poorly, Spurs, but then they'll grow into it. But especially with Kane goes, it's going to be very interesting to see how they cope with that. For me, I'm not anticipating anything with Spurs, and I'm definitely going to break tradition within the traditional top 6. I typically play it safe and get the traditional top 6 to finish in the top 6. I'm going to mix it up this year, because definitely my predictions last year were absolutely terrible with my over-reliance of the top 6 finishing 1st to 6th. I do think now we've got a real competitiveness now within this league, which I'm absolutely loving. Coming in at 7th place, this was really tough. 7th and 6th, I kept swapping around, and I made a last minute change with it. 7th place, I'm going for Aston Villa. I do think Aston Villa could easily finish top 6. I just have a slightly bit more confidence with the other teams higher than them in the table at the moment. Some people are predicting them top 6, some people are predicting them to finish just outside. I've got them to finish just outside, but 7th place again, which would match their position from last season actually. And I do think the investment that Aston Villa had, getting the likes of Yuri Tielemans in very early on, I think is fantastic for them there. I believe they've got Pau Torres in, which if that's the case, that is a fantastic signing for Aston Villa there. I do like how quickly they do get their signings in, as I repeat as well. I think even getting Moussa Diaby for Bayer Leverkusen as well. Ambitious signing, and honestly, the signings are quite ambitious. But we have seen it before with ambitious signings, and they do not fit within the squad very well. But I think they've got a really good manager in Unai Emery who can get the best out of them there. I do think there's a lot of things that can go for them. But if they get a couple of their key players injured, like Watkins, if he's injured for a lot of that season, who's really going to step up and score the same amount of goals he's going to score? There's going to be a lot of over-reliance, I think, in terms of their forward line. So that is why I think with it having too many ifs and buts, for me, that I can predict them to finish top 6. But honestly, Aston Villa could easily prove me wrong. So I'm going to predict them in 7th. And for the team who finished in 6th, the team that I nearly swapped out for Aston Villa is Chelsea. So Chelsea is going to be very difficult to predict, I think. I think this is where they're at the moment. And honestly, with them finishing in 12th place last season, I would take a 6th place improvement and make things a little bit more sturdy. I do think the style of football is much better. Much better now. I can definitely see a good team chemistry forming there when I saw them in pre-season there. I do think there's a lot more youth that could have a chance of entering into the starting 11. Pochettino has definitely wanted to use that squad. I think he still feels the squad is a bit too overbloated, so there could be more transfers being moved from Chelsea. I mean, they've lost a lot of their squad, but the players they got in, I think, are great for the first 11. If you've got a couple there, they'll be good later on down the line with them being squad players. But I'm very excited to see how Nicholas Jackson plays. He's looked pretty good in pre-season. A bit of a risk signing in a way, but for what we've seen in pre-season, he was worth every penny as it stands. He's now really got to do it to the big stage and just try and get rid of the monkey off the back with Chelsea strikers just not performing. I do have my fear that we've already have pretty much season-ending injuries with Wesley Fofana. Nkunku today has picked up a long-term injury as well, which is absolutely devastating because he looks really good in pre-season there. I think had both Fofana and Nkunku been available for most of the season, I probably would be backing Chelsea to finish a bit higher. But for me, I think it's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster of a season. But overall, I think it will tail on with Chelsea getting European football by the skin of their teeth based on the options that they've got. So I'm going to go for Chelsea for safe, with them having just turning a new page, new beginning, and no European football so they can concentrate on this league. I think that will be the difference. So coming in at 5th place on the table, this also may surprise a couple of you, but I've gone for Newcastle. Newcastle 5th, so it's a 1 place lower than what they finished from last season. I think ultimately with Newcastle, they were able to concentrate on the league. They managed to get themselves finishing within the top 4, which was amazing. But now they've got Champions League, the intensity of that to balance that with all the other domestic cups in the Premier League. I think it's going to be very tough on them. They've not signed too many players in. So I would have loved to see more signings there just so their depth could improve. But I do think the quality of their players they've got, I still think is better than Chelsea. I still think it's much better actually than Chelsea there. And I do think it's going to be very close between 5th and 4th. But ultimately for me, I think with the 4th team, which I'll say in a minute, I think they've got a slightly larger squad than Newcastle. And ultimately with Newcastle not having to deal with European football for quite some time, I think it's going to take a lot of getting used to there. But if Eddie Howe can somehow get a tune out of those players and being able to rotate both competitions, then ultimately they should finish 4th easily. Because with their starting 11, I think it does rival one of the best starting 11s within the league. 4th place for me is Liverpool. I don't think Liverpool are going to finish 2nd. I think a couple of people are predicting Liverpool to finish 2nd. And I get that with the momentum that Klopp could build up. But they have lost a lot, especially in that midfield. But midfield definitely needed change. I'm going to be interested to see McAllister is going to be a first team player within that squad. I hope he does, because he was very, very important with Brighton's success last season. And ultimately, I think there is going to be a lot of change in the way that they play. You know, they let a lot of people go. And with them having Europa League football, it's going to be interesting to see how they balance that commitment to doing the Premier League as well. Ultimately, their squad is a little bit lower in depth than last season, but I think still, ultimately, the options that they have, I think they could prove to have that extra experience to get those tight games, won for Liverpool, if that makes sense. And I do think Newcastle, they will start improving, with those players, because, last season, a lot of these players, they would have this expectation for the first time getting to the top 4. Now they've got to balance European football, and that expectation just heightens even more. And I think Newcastle will just fall a little bit short on that, but they'll be better with it next year. And with Liverpool, I think because they've got that experience doing that, I think they'll be better off with it. So for me, that is 4th place. So my top 3, I think most people's top 3 are very, very similar, but I'm going to switch it up a little bit. 3rd place for me is Arsenal. I can't deny all the signings they've made, I've been big fans of. I'm really, really excited with it. My only doubt, again, bit similar with Newcastle. I don't know how they're going to cope European football, because Arsenal did so well getting 2nd place last season. I can't deny that, but they had no European football. They definitely improved their depth, so that for me edges them ahead of Newcastle and Liverpool with the improvement they've had in their depth. And obviously, just with the feel-good factor at the moment as well, I do think that they're getting a good sense of confidence, Arsenal, and I think that will carry their season forward as well. I really like the signing of Declan Rice especially. I think a lot of Spurs fans want him to flop, especially with considering the amount of money they paid for him, but I do think he'll be a great signing there. And I do think Arsenal will be there and thereabouts again. I just think it's going to be very, very difficult for Arsenal to carry that pace throughout the whole season compared to the Manchester clubs. So maybe the biggest shock of this table predictions, but I've got Manchester United to finish second. Now, based on their pre-season, Manchester United definitely should not finish second. But I just have a very strange feeling that things will start to click when the league starts. If they start really poorly, I'm going to look such a moron predicting Manchester United to finish second. But based on the signings they've made, I think Manchester United's squad, with terms of their starting 11, should be one of the best in the league. Should be being the key word. Erik ten Hag's going to have another year of experience within the Premier League. And ultimately, some of the unbeaten runs that he managed to get Manchester United to do, they looked really, really comfortable at a couple of stages as well. And Manchester United were able to get to a League Cup final, and they were able to get to an FA Cup final as well. So that already tells me that they've definitely got a large enough squad to cope with the overwhelming competitions that they got to face, which is why I think I will edge them over the rest of the teams in the league. But they've really got to prioritise that Premier League. And I think with the signings that they've made, I think Manchester United can deal with that. So for me, Manchester United finishing second, and it's going to sound very boring, but for me, first place is Manchester City. They've lost players. Riyad Mahrez going to the Saudi League, a little bit of a blow on their part there. But even with that, they've still got players in. I mean, like Gvardiol, for instance, where Chelsea were linked with him a couple of years ago. It hurts me to see him as a Manchester City player, but ultimately, Manchester City are the best club in the Premier League right now, so they're going to attract the biggest talent. Also getting Kovacic in for Chelsea. I knew he wasn't too good last season, but I think if he plays anything similar like he was previous seasons for Chelsea, he will be an amazing player for this Manchester City team. And he could be a good replacement for Gundogan, actually. So, ultimately, despite Manchester City losing them out, they've also gained enough. And I think for me, they will cope again, Manchester City. Don't necessarily think they're going to win a treble. I think that was just incredible for them last season. But I think they'll do enough to win the Premier League again. So, on the left-hand side of the screen are my Premier League 23-24 table predictions. Let me know what you think of them in the comments down below. And as I said, guys, in the start of the video, make sure you show your predictions as well, because I would love to see your differing opinions and your differing tables as well. But that will wrap it up for today. If you guys enjoyed the video, please smash the like button. It really helps the channel. Please do hit the subscribe button if you've not done so. It really does help. If you want to follow my socials, you can also follow them there as well. And please share the channel too. All these things really, really do help the future of this channel. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are legendary for studying this video. And as always, I'll see you guys soon. Take care, everyone.